pick a couple of sites that we've done. And then I realised that, we've done loads of sites in the Black Mountains, you know. That's where we're based. So, and so I thought, well, I'd first of all, I'd mention very, very quickly a couple of the sites, paradoxically, that I'm not going to talk about. One of those is we excavated a rather nice, grand 18th century villa in the centre of Cwrcawl under the Conservative Club. And that was an amazing day. It was literally just, you know, sort of 200 mil underneath the ground, and there was this great big mansion owned by a local solicitor, and the Conservative Club had reused these barrel-vaulted cellars as the beer cellar. It was absolutely lovely. And then we found out once we left that they then sold the site, and now a chain supermarket is going to be moving in there, much to the horror of the whole of Cwrcawl, I understand. So, and we've also been working at Llangattock Park most recently on the chambered tomb there. There's a new path that's gone in, and we did some excavation work there. We also did some multispectral analysis there of the field to see if we could pick up any remnants of the chambered tomb with varying degrees of success. And that sort of leads me smoothly on to talk about our present projects. We're a straightforward archaeological company, but we're a fairly new archaeological company. I sort of cut my teeth with the Clwyd-Powys Archaeological Trust. I worked for them for more than 15 years, and then decided that the commute from Abergavenny down to Swansea was more than I could cope with 2 young children. So in 2017, I decided to go out on my own, trying to find that elusive work-life balance. But then I've ended up being even more busy than I was before. But there we go. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is the work that we do. We do, you know, common garden archaeological work, but we also use a lot of drones, a lot of photogrammetry, a lot of LiDAR in the work that we do, and we've tried to sort of move into a seamless, complete digital way of recording archaeological sites. So I'm going to touch on that briefly. So here we go. So one of the first sites that I'm going to talk about today is Garnderys Forge, and of which and Hills Tramway, which I'm sure everybody is well aware of. This lovely painting here is the forge. This is dated to about the 1820s. I found it. It was an image that I saw for sale, if you can believe that. But with not much. It was on the Tate. It was in the Tate Museum for a while. And not much is known about it, but I suspect that this image is one of the images that Michael Blackmore used for his wonderful reconstruction drawings, which I will endeavour to show you in a second. So that the reason we were there mainly was because Western Power had to replace a load of H-poles in the scheduled monument area. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to drive great big massive track machines down Hills Tram Road, much to the horror of Cadw and ourselves. So what Cadw asked us to do is they wanted to quantify how basically what the damage potentially could be from these massive machines, moving down the tram road. So we were asked to carry out an archaeological watch and brief and a survey, and I'll go into the results of that in a second. But just briefly, Garnderys Forge. It was built around about 1815. It's an offshoot of the Blaenavon Ironworks. Blaenavon Ironworks starting in 1787. By Thomas Hill and Benjamin Pratt, and a Welsh-speaking Welshman, if there is such a thing, called Thomas Hopkins. And he came down, he was managing furnaces at Rudgley, and they successfully negotiated a 21-year lease from the Lord of Abergavenny, which they essentially took it off of the Hanbury family. The Hanbury family had been there since about the mid 16th century, with many charcoal iron furnaces in the area. The Llanelli furnace at the bottom of the Clwyd-Powys Gorge being probably one of the more famous ones. And they took over and constructed the furnaces. The Garnddyris furnace was primarily used to process the pig iron into wrought iron bar and plates, and then they needed a way of getting that to the Brecon and Abergavenny Canal, and down, north and south, then down to Newport and to the docks. And they did that by constructing Hills Tramroad. You probably can't see much of that writing. I don't know if you can see it, but at the height of the works at Garnddyris, there was about 450 people living there, and they were producing over 200 tons of wrought iron per week. They had some big puddling furnaces there, a steam engine, and they were using Henry Court's process, which he developed in the late, the early 1780s. Is that going to work? So I wanted to include this. I don't know if you're a fan. I'm a huge fan. Michael Blackmore. You can see his archaeological illustrations all over the World Heritage Site area, anywhere around here. And they're absolutely wonderful, and they're really, really accurate. And so this shows the forge as it would have been in about 1850. This was really, just before it really sort of didn't become commercially viable anymore. But you've got the forge, if I can use my finger, you've got the forge here. You've got a stack square there, so if anybody knows Glenavon, you've got the big stack square that they use for the BBC programme. This is an almost identical stack square, but in miniature. There was also pubs up there, the Queen Vic, or the Royal Vic, as it was called, back here, and workers' housing as well. And then you can see from this lovely image, which again, I think you probably used that image I first showed you as inspiration, all the network of tram roads that you can see across the landscape, including the one in the bottom right-hand corner, which is Hills Tram Road. So Thomas Hill built basically there was a level driven in from the Glenavon side into the mountain, and he extended that in around about 1815 to produce a 1.5 mile tramroad tunnel. At the time, it was the longest tramroad tunnel in Britain, possibly the world, dare I say it. Its principal function was to connect the Glenavon Ironworks with mainly with the quarries at Tyler and Pwllheli, and then to Garnddyris, because before that there had been the only way to get the limestone that the ironworks needed was to take that over the mountain. And they did that. There was a pack horseway that went from the Tyler quarries on Gilwyn Hill, and it went all the way up to Keeper's Pond, and then dropped down from Keeper's Pond into the Glenavon works, and was tipped off into stays into the works there. At Garnddyris, they were already having problems with, even early on, with the amount of slag that they were producing. So they realised that the Hills Tram Road, as it passes through the works, they had to build a cut and cover tunnel to get it past the works before it looped around the Blorange Mountain and then dropped through a series of inclines down to the wharves, the canal wharves at Llanfoist. Now, the only reason I'm showing you this is because I just think it's lovely. So, this is Michael Blackmore again. We were very lucky. We were given the 1972 archive. So there's only ever been one excavation at Garnddyris, and that was in 1972. And Michael Blackmore just happened to be one of the illustrators with the Abergavenny Steam Society. And he was asked to do a site drawing, and that is the best site drawing I have ever seen in my life. You know, like in 1972 to draw a lovely isometric drawing, and it's perfect for us because it tells us exactly what was going on then as well, because obviously 1972 was a little while ago now, and things have changed on site. There were things like, if I can scrabble across, the weighbridge over here, which up until the 1950s and 60s was roofed, and there was a gentleman living there. There's a lovely picture in the archive of this chap growing cabbages. There's no way in hell I would ever want to grow any vegetable there, because it is a very, 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 very toxic landscape. So that gives you a really, really brief kind of picture of Guildhall. It was a really, really important site. It kind of it was no longer profitable after about 1855, and the works were, and the engines and furnaces, anything of value, was moved over to Forge side on the other side, the south side of Blenavon, and it was abandoned. But people stayed living there up until the 1960s, and there's a wonderful film on the BBC, which you can still get on YouTube. And I would, if you Google the lost village of Pwllheli and watch it, it's wonderful, because the council by 1960 in their infinite wisdom decided that the whole area up there was a slum. So they cleared everybody out. There was no electricity, there was no running water. It was you know, really fossilized in time, and they cleared everybody out, moved them down into bungalows down in Gilwan and other places, Llanfoist, and then they bulldozed the lot. Most of the houses were pulled down at that point. So that's a bit of background. What we were asked to do, we were asked to do 2 surveys. So we use drones. So we were asked to do a really large survey. There was about 12-ish, a little bit over, hectares that we surveyed. And we wanted to create a digital twin. We wanted to be able to know what the landscape was now, because also it was a good excuse to go and do a survey as well, especially if Western Power were paying and not Cadw. So Cadw were quite keen on that. So we did the big survey, and then we did an archaeological watching brief whilst Western Power came in and did their and replaced the H-pole. They replaced a couple of H-poles, but the main one is they had to come in off the road here. They travelled down onto the on Hill. This is Hill's tram road here, and they had to get up to a H-pole all up here. And they have this most amazing, I don't know if you've seen it, they've got this most amazing machine. It's like a crab. It's like an excavator, but with additional arms, and it just like claws its way like some dystopian horror movie up the hillside. It was amazing to watch. But nevertheless, that meant there was lots of plant down there, lots of diggers moved around, lots of tracked vehicles. So we were asked at the end of it then to repeat the survey. And to see what had changed, what had been damaged, and if anybody, I know there's some here that have experience with photogrammetry and survey work with drones. You become obsessed with error margins, and we are absolutely obsessed with error margins. And as soon as you constrain the model to the Ordnance Survey, you become obsessed with trying to get down to millimetre accuracy with the model. You become quite, well, I do anyway. So what we produce, as well as a 3D model, we produce what's called an orthomosaic, and that's actually where the photographs, there was about 6,000 photographs that we took of the site, are stitched together, pixel by pixel. And to produce a true Google Earth style image, but it is actually all the images stitched together in a measured way. And that enabled us to create these high-resolution renders of the site, which you can begin to see. You can begin to see some dark areas here, which weren't in previous surveys. You can begin to see where the wheel ruts and the things that are going on. But most importantly, because we're able to produce such a detailed record, we're able to, this is actually the 3D model. It came out rather well, even if I do say so myself. what you end up being able to do then is produce two-dimensional plans and drawings of the damage, and you can then compare that to the original survey and to see what has changed. And in the end, with this site, not a lot. It was only some superficial damage to the surface of the tram road as the machines rumbled down. Cadw were very happy. The landowner was not very happy because that meant that he wasn't going to get paid as much money by Western Power because there wasn't that much damage. But and he was insistent on us finding every last scrap of damage that we could. But to be fair to them, they were quite respectful. There's quite a bit of damage. Again, if you're familiar with the site, there's the information board up here. Another one of Michael Blackmore's drawings up there as well. There was quite a bit of damage up there because that became a sort of an impromptu sort of car park, as it were. So what we decided, rather than delve off into the Neolithic and other sites, we decided that we'd stay on a sort of an industrial theme and keep it within the World Heritage Site. So we were asked to come and survey a tiny little barn associated with the Tyler quarries. So again, the Tyler quarries are those ones. They are 1786-87. They were opened up for the Blenavon Ironworks because obviously the ironworks needed a lot of limestone to act as flux to make all the slag stick together in the furnaces. And in fact, most of the tram roads across the World Heritage Site are mainly limestone. Yes, they were utilised for the collieries as well, but a large proportion of them are to do with getting limestone from places like Guildhall Hill over to the ironworks. So this was a fairly innocuous looking barn. There it is. It was the Royal Commission had been up there. And thought it was rather important because it was associated with the cottage, and the cottage was anecdotally every resident that had ever lived there had said that it was the Quarryman's Arms, and that was passed down from resident to resident, family to family, so it became enshrined in law that therefore it must be the Quarryman's Arms, but there's no actually evidence for this at all. I suspect it was probably somebody's house, and where people, at the end of a hard day went and got, fairly well inebriated. But who knows? But nevertheless, we went along to have a look at this, what was supposed to be a stable. And it turned out to be quite an interesting building. We couldn't find, as you might expect, so the Tyler settlement here was established as quarry for the quarry workers for the quarries at Tyler and Portley. Portley was connected, but it was a little bit too far away, but mainly for Tyler. And it's there. The 1847 Llanelli tithe map has them on it. The first edition Ordnance Survey map has them on there. But curiously, this barn doesn't really appear until, I'll use my finger, until you get to the first edition. But I suspect that actually this barn was there when the tithe was drawn up and surveyed, and I suspect it was probably contemporary with the openings of the quarries, or if not the opening, maybe within 20 years of it opening, which I'll come into a second. So as I alluded to earlier, the limestone was taken over by horse tracks, basically, at the beginning of the working life of the quarry. And then we have a wonderful bit of survey work, or rather reporting done by the Reverend William Cox, which I'll come on to in a minute, where he records the fledgling plateway being built. But why I've included another Michael Blackmore image there, but sadly that's not come out. But that's Gilwen Hill, and you can see it's awash with quarries and tramroads. But why? Why? Well, actually, as well as the Blaenavon Ironworks, the lime was a growing trade. If any of you have walked along as I'm sure you have, along the canal, you'll have seen that on every single wharf, Gilwen, Llanfoes, Llangata, Goitra is a big one. You all get these really, really big lime works. And so, as well as lime going over to the ironworks, lime became a really profitable business. And where was it going? Well, quite a lot of it was used as fertilizer, but we don't really need that much lime, not around here at least. So it was going down the canals to the docks, and then it was going across to to England, to the Quantocks, where they were trying to improve the soil over there. And then we were getting all of this amazing material culture back, gravel-tempered, Devon gravel-tempered ware coming back. You find that all across South Wales. It's in everything. So there was this massive lime trade. And so everybody was trying to get in on the act. So you can imagine the canal was a very, 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 not just with coal, but actually lime being fundamentally a really important commodity. Now, I mentioned the Reverend William Cox, and he did a survey in 1798, 1799 of Monmouthshire, as it was then, mainly because it was too dangerous to do a great tour, in France or down into Italy at the moment, because there was these damned Republicans, upsetting Europe at the time. So quite a lot of wealthy individuals were going around and doing grand tours of the home counties, and I'm glad they did, because we've got an amazing. If you've ever read the Reverend Cox, it's amazing. It's 2 volumes. It's got loads of wonderful images in it as well, and plans. But this one sticks out in my mind because he actually came to the Tyler quarries. He actually came to Blaenavon, and he came and had a look at the quarries. And he's one of the first commentators ever to record from a tramroad being built. He actually went up there and witnessed it being built. And I've just copied a couple of things here, he describes how they were built, how they were put together, the tramroad sleepers, the fact that they initially had cast iron sleepers, but they were prone to break-in, so they ended up going over to timber because they could absorb the vibrations from the drams. And then he ends one passage with this one, and I'll read it out because it is absolutely wonderful, and I want to try and get this into every single report we ever write on this area because it's amazing. He describes the Hills Tramroad, and certainly the tramroad over from Tyler, as winding round the tides of precipices in a picturesque object, and the cars filled with coals or iron and gliding along occasionally without horses impress the traveller who is unaccustomed to such spectacles with pleasing astonishment. That's just wonderful language. That's amazing. But I've only managed to get it into one report so far, but nevertheless. So that's the kind of context that we find this rather average-looking cart shed in. But nevertheless, it was on its last legs. There was a gigantic crack down the western side. The building was falling to pieces, and we were asked to go and make a digital twin of it to preserve it because it was going to be lost. And obviously it was important because it was a stable relating to the quarryman's arms. So we did a drone survey. We mixed that with some terrestrial cameras, and we produced some really high density point clouds and 3D meshes. And we also produced very, very detailed orthomosaic images as well. In the process of recording the building, we discovered that the building is only half a building, that once it was a much larger building, we were able to use the 3D model then to interrogate the building long after we've left site, long after the building had gone. So we were able to, discover that actually this wall here is a pretty new wall, and actually we've got an archway here, and it was actually a really quite big cart shed, bigger than you would expect for, a quarryman, perhaps. A lot of resources and money probably went into it, and you can imagine certainly one or two large carts being stored in there, and certainly more important than, I would have thought a small stable. We had a good look around the inside. It's never been used as a stable in its life. The ceilings are too low. Any horse in there would have coughed itself to death in short succession. So what I think it is, I think it's probably, if not original, but an early cart shed associated with the Tyler works. Probably associated with getting either the workers or their materials, their tools up into the quarry to quarry the stone and get it over to the Blenavon works. So whilst a fairly innocuous little cart shed, it's now, at least now it's preserved. So in the future, if anybody wants to know what it used to look like, there's a very detailed record. Did we go over the top with it? We probably did a little bit, but it was such a nice little building anyway. So staying within the World Heritage Site, we're invited to do some work at the Clwyd-Powys Works. This was, again, if any of you are familiar with the Clwyd-Powys Works, it's largely been under vegetation for most of my living memory anyway. It's been under huge swathes of vegetation. You can't really see much of it. And Monmouthshire County Council, CADU, started a conservation programme. So the site was initially cleared of vegetation, and you can see this is a drone shot of the site, relatively clear of vegetation. And we were asked to go in and produce a digital twin, a 3D model of the site, as well as all the other things, and also to look at phasing and to try and understand the building better, because it had only really been investigated once in the 1980s by Anne Wilson, who I think worked at the park at that time. But it's a really interesting site. So I wanted to include a couple of, before I delve into the 3D stuff, a bit of history on the site. So we've got some wonderful images. The more famous one is John Wood's Rivers of Wales, which, talking about hay, I did see in a bookshop in Hay for £800. Didn't buy it, but really wanted to. But wow, but what a book anyway. But there is Cardiff University have got a really good copy of it as well, if you ever need to look through it. But so this shows the original ironworks with the furnace number 1 and furnace number 2, and this amazing launder that took water from the Nantdire stream to power a huge 42-foot cast iron, if you can believe it, water wheel. It was founded by Edward Fair and Thomas Cook, 1793, and about 3 years later, it was. They were joined by the Kendall brothers, and the Clwyd Ironwork Company was established. Now, Edward Frere, probably many of you will know, he had a very, very famous son, Sir Bartle Frere, who went around slaughtering Zulus, among other things, and and doing thoroughly disruptive things, and was called back to the UK, and it was all brushed over, and he was given jobs elsewhere in government. But nevertheless, he was born, Sir Bartleford was born in Clwyd House, which is one of the main, which is a big white house next to the Llanelli furnace, which was built in around about 1693. Originally, as I said, there was two furnaces. Furnace number 1 was 1793, furnace number 2, 1797. They weren't really, though, although furnace number 1 was in blast. I don't think furnace number 2 was much in blast before 1805. That's when you get the records for how much iron was being produced. We also got a third furnace was added, and then a fourth furnace was added. The third furnace was added in about 1826. Smarts Bridge was constructed about the same time, 1824. And then by 1842, there was a fourth furnace. And if you can believe it, they had a Neath Abbey Ironworks, Bolton and Watt 24-inch steam blowing engine as well, added about that time. The plans were drawn up in about 1835, 1836 for it. And they brought it up from Neath all the way cross-country on the back of carts and horses, and I just think that in itself is a staggering achievement, to bring a steam engine all the way across country. I thought I'd give you another one of Michael Blackmore's amazing images. So this is his interpretation of the works in around about 1840 at the height. You've got furnace number 1 here, furnace number 2 here. This is often called furnace number 3, but it's not, it's furnace number 4. Furnace number 3 is over here. This engine house here is in completely the wrong place. This engine house is actually, must be in front of the works, because there's a furnace here. There's as we discovered when all the vegetation was stripped off. It was producing, it wasn't a particularly happy ironworks. It was a profitable ironworks, but because they borrowed so much money to get it going, it was never, they were always in trouble financially. So whilst it was profitable, they were always in financial peril. They started off by producing around about 1,600 tonnes a year with furnace number 1. And then by the 1840s, they were producing over 10,000 tonnes a year, which is a respectable amount. We've got some good records about who was working there. There were lots of surveys done in the mid-19th century, particularly of children in the ironwork and in the ironworks, and there were up to about there was 400 or 500 people working in the ironworks, and then there was another sort of 600 or 700 people working in the allied industries, working the tramroads, the quarries, the collieries, up and down the Clwyd Gorge. But peculiarly, this site sported a school. It was located next to in between the current bridge, as you go over the Clwyd, and Smarts Bridge, there was a small school building there, and girls up to the age of about 11 had to be in school, which is amazing, really, when you think about it. They did try and convert it to steel, but it didn't really work. And then by the 1815-3, there was a board meeting where they decided that was pretty much it, and they were going to have to sell. They did sell it. They tried to do some to make plates there. That failed. They carried on working at the forge, so the Llanelli forge, which had been associated with the charcoal furnace of the same name across the river. That forge continued to be used, and actually that was converted to a tinplate works. And so industry carried on there, but by about 1871, this site completely closed. So, oh, there we are. I thought and I cut it down from 200 slides as well. So Anne Wilson, who I've never met, she excavated the works in the 1980s, and this is the only intervention that we've had. She uncovered furnace number 1, furnace number 2, what she thought was furnace number 3, but is actually furnace number 4. Part of the, she also uncovered part of the casting house here as well. There we are. Sorry, it didn't work there for a minute. And then I thought I'd include a quick picture of anybody that routinely travels up the Clwyd Gorge. May or may not recognise this, but this is the A465 being built. And at that time, the Clwyd Ironworks had been turned into a cement works. And you can see that where the former charging houses was now, there were stays up here, and they were producing or making cement up here. It was a gravity-fed operation. Most of the workers' housing and the managers' housing at that point was beginning to be abandoned. And I suspect that actually a large part of the site was preserved because of the amount of material that was dumped over the top. The coking works, so this is where the coke works were. That was largely destroyed by this time. And then you can see as little as sort of 7 years ago, the site was absolutely covered in vegetation. So when they cleared the vegetation, it was done by Ibex. It was amazing to see the whole site. And what Cadw wanted was a really detailed 3D model of the site, so we could capture it now. Because what does vegetation do? Bloody stuff grows back again, doesn't it? And it has. It's started to grow back already. So, but what we've been able to do is we've been able to identify that yes, we do know where the third furnace is because it's here. We've got voussoirs going off to that would have come over to a bridge house. There's no way that we could have had a Bolton and Watt engine in here. There wouldn't have been room, so it means it must have been out here. We've got our fourth furnace here. And we've got furnace 2 and furnace 1 there. So for the first time, we get a really, really good in-depth look at the site, and we're able to start phasing it with a fair degree of accuracy without even having to put a trowel in the ground. We're also able to do. I'm winding up now, Paul. We're going to miss the Brynhall. I've run out of time, sorry. We're also able to do some fun stuff. So we've worked out where the 42-foot wheel would have been. Now the vegetation's cleared. We've been able to find the inclined stonework, which would have housed the wheel, and we can then chop the model up in CAD, and we can start to build and try and interpret, where it would have sat. This is important. Why? Well, actually, if you're doing conservation work, you need to know where the gearing is. You need to know where to look for stuff. So we've got a huge 42-foot wheel in here, and up here you would have had some serious gearing and apparatus to hold it in place. Because you think of the centrifugal force of a wheel that is almost as big as the wheel at Cyfarthfa, and that was an absolutely humongous wheel. So really, really extraordinary. Also, the other thing to mention is now the vegetation is gone, we can see the back of the charging house, the calcining kilns back here. Actually, some of the work that they did when it was a cement works to stabilise the walls has weirdly preserved it. So actually, the cement works, while everybody laments that they went in and they did destroy quite a lot of stuff, they've actually gone some way in preserving the site. But what this has left us with is lots more questions, but also we can sit now in the comfort of our office, and we can interrogate the 3D model, and because we've got it down to sort of centimetre accurate. We've even recorded all the passages behind the furnaces. We've recorded all of the subterranean passages as well. So you can really interrogate the model, and then and also for years to come. I won't now talk about the gate for you all because I would have had to have read it much.